I'm so excited for today's episode. We are going to dive into Gestalt language development. If you work with a child with autism or if you have a child with autism, this episode is simply a can't miss. We are going to look at what is evidence-based when it comes to Gestalt language development, what you should be doing on Monday morning. We're also going to look at what is not evidence-based, what you do not want to do on Monday morning when it comes to Gestalt language development. So we're going to look at the strengths of Gestalt language development. We're also going to look at the weaknesses. My goal is that you're going to be able to immediately put this into practice. As a speech language pathologist, you need to, as the Bhagavad Gita says, be discerning like a swan. Swallow what nourishes you, the milk, and spit out the dirt. Paradigm that you come across, you are going to find strengths and weaknesses. It's important to follow with discernment. It's also important to be eclectic in your approach, and we're going to talk about that, in which how we're going to combine what works from Gestalt language development to what works from other intervention programs. Let's talk today about the active ingredients from the Gestalt language processing paradigm. We're also going to talk about what is totally ineffective from the Gestalt language processing paradigm. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's dive in to the research. As you can see, I have a nice stack here. This is only half of the research I reviewed for this. And that's because when it comes to the research on Gestalt language processing, you are going to find that many question the evidence base for it. The meta-analytic research on Gestalt language interventions is going to say it is largely ineffective. Now, I don't know published Gestalt language intervention programs that actually have been researched. So I'm going to put that out there before we discount what we can take from Gestalt language processing. But the latest meta-analytic research is simply saying, buyer beware, when it comes to Gestalt language processing interventions, they lack the evidence base to show that they are effective in improving outcomes for children on the autism spectrum. That said, we're going to take a deep dive. Let's start right now. First, we're going to talk about assessment. And when it comes to assessment, the Gestalt language processing paradigm, for instance, that Marge Blanc uses, is based off of Barry Prisant's Echolalia, as well as Laura Lee, who developed the developmental sentence scoring of how children develop language. It's a combination of those two to form 6 stages. To briefly give you an outline of how those 6 stages develop, you begin with echolalia, you begin with scripted, memorized chunks of speech. That's where the child starts. So you can think of the child whose first words are songs, pieces from songs. The first words are saying the ABCs or the 1, 2, 3s, or the first words are saying scripts from a movie or TV show. These are their first words that you're hearing out of them. This is where Blanc would say some children start developing language on the autism spectrum. Not all children, but they begin with echolalia. And this echolalia could be delayed echolalia, in which they're repeating something from a previous time, something that a parent said at home, something from a movie, something from a song, and they're repeating it in a different context. Or it could be immediate echolalia, in which you say, "What's your name?" And they say, "What's your name?" And they're repeating back exactly what you have said. So that's where they're beginning in their speech development. It's repeated, okay, either a delayed or immediate. Then Blanc goes on to the next stage, in which he talks about how it becomes mitigated, the echolalia. So it's not exactly the same as what they've heard. For instance, maybe they're doing the numbers 1 through 10, and they're going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And then, for instance, they see the number 5, and they go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and they stop there. They've changed the script. They've mitigated it. They shortened it, for instance, and they've only counted to 5 instead of the count to 10. They've taken that script and they've changed it themselves and they've mitigated it. As the echolalia improves, it becomes more contextually appropriate. Then she talks about how then they start developing speech much like an analytic speaker would, in that they begin saying single words and then they start combining their words and then they start producing sentences, complex sentences, and then narratives, just like your neurotypical speaker develops speech. Now, this is evidence-based, and that the research does indicate that children on the autism spectrum are more likely to use repetitive words and phrases in their speech than their neurotypical peers and than their peers with developmental language delays. The research also indicates that their speech does become more generative and spontaneous as their language improves. You're going to see that the speech becomes more spontaneous, more diverse, and you're going to see that it becomes longer and more complex as the child improves in language development. And this is supported in the research. So when we take a step back and we're like, how can we use this information on Monday morning? This idea of the Gestalt language processing paradigm of language development, we are going to look for in our language samples. Are we seeing less repetitive utterances? So what I look for in my language samples, and I typically take language samples of 25 utterances because of time constraints, and because our research has indicated that if the child has an MLU of 3.0 or below, we find the same outcome at 25 utterances as we'd find at 50. Now, when you're working with preschoolers, as I do, that who are minimally speaking, getting 50 continuous utterance language sample would take weeks. I do not have weeks of therapy time to expend on a language sample. And that's why it's invaluable for me to do 25 continuous utterances. You can find this on ResearchGate. We were finding at 50 and 25, they were very reliable with one another. What our research has shown is as the children improve in language development, you're going to see less repetitive utterances. What we looked at is they're saying the exact same utterance again and again and again and again. We looked at our language sample of 25 continuous utterances, and they would say, for instance, it looks like a bird. 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 The exact same utterance again and again. We had here 20% interrepetitive speech, in which they were saying the exact same thing over and over again. Now, as these children improved in their language development, we saw less and less of that, and this is supported in the research as well. Now only 5% of the utterances were exact repetitions of something they had said before. You're going to see more spontaneous speech development and less repetition with improvement. Second, you're going to want to look at diversity. Look at their type token ratio. You divide what was the total number of different words over the total number of words. What percentage did you have? This is very supported by the research for children with autism. You're going to want to see an increase in the percentage of diverse words used. If you wanted to take it a step deeper, look at the diversity of verbs. The total number of verbs used will be at the bottom. The total number of different verbs will be at the top. The percentage of different verbs used. You're going to want to see an increase in that. So you can probably think of children with autism you work with who use want for everything. That might be their go-to verb. We want to see over time an increased diversity in verbs that they're using in that language sample. That's going to be an indicator of improvement in communication. Let's look at the third area of diversity, and that is the syntactical diversity. A lot of our kids are subject, verb, object, simple sentences. We're going to want to look at qualitatively expanded sentences, sentences where the verb is inverted, use compound sentences, complex sentences, which are huge. Complex sentences are a pivotal moment that is the proto-narrative when they're combining two distinct ideas. It's a big moment. Are we seeing sentences in passive tense? So we're going to look for diversity and syntax. That's going to become hugely important. You might have, for instance, a long MLU, mean length of utterance, because the child is scripting or giving you a song or giving you a piece from a movie. But you're going to see improvement when it comes to an increase in the diversity of language they use. It's not about how long the utterance is, it's about diversity of syntax. Another way you can look at this is looking at the subject and verb. For instance, they may say, I want. Okay, that's I, subject, verb, want. Well, the next one would say, you want. Okay, well, that's different. You're saying you want. It's a different subject-verb combination. That would be two different ways of using the verbs. You look at the number of subject-verb combinations, you're going to want to see an increase in that. So they're not always using I want, I want, I want. It's the same subject verb combination. You're going to want to see syntactic diversity in that they're using different subject verb combinations, because when the subject changes, you're going to have a different verb. That's another way you can look at syntactical diversity. So once again, when I'm talking about, okay, this makes sense, the way the natural language development paradigm works, in which you're seeing more spontaneous language, it's increasing in length and complexity, that's what we want to see. And you're going to see that on the language sample. Language sample is very, very important. It's going to tell you a lot about how this child's language is developing. So then we look at the next area of diversity that we want to see, and that's grammatical diversity. And you can capture that through MLU. You have a different verb ending that's going to count as a morpheme that you add to your count. You're going to want to see an increase in that area as well. So when we look at diversity being like the spice of language life for children with autism, there's many areas we can look at. We can look at vocabulary diversity improving, and in that area, the research indicates verbs matter more than nouns. The second area we want to look at is syntactical diversity, and you can do that qualitatively, but if you want a number, you can look at the subject-verb agreement. Are they using different forms of subject-verb? Here we have first person, here we have second person, here we have third person. We're using different subject-verb agreements. If you wanted a number, and that shows that there's syntactical diversity. You can also go for MLU. MLU is going to let us know, are we improving in the morphological complexity? Those are areas that we're going to see an increase in diversity in our language samples as the child improves in their language development. As far as I'm concerned, the best assessment you could give with children with autism to gauge their improvement is spontaneous language sample. If the MLU is below 3.0, and you can check our research out on ResearchGate, you will get reliable results with only 25 utterances. You do not need the 50 continuance utterances to use a month of therapy sessions to do this. I don't necessarily think you need to use Laura Lee's developmental sentence scoring method, which is a bit too intricate. Looking at the basics is really going to give you an idea if you're moving in the right direction. As the child improves in their spontaneous language development, you are going to see less gestalts. You're going to see less repetitive speech. When I talk about gestalts, I look at it as repetitive speech. We're going to see less of it in the language sample as the child improves. That said, I want you to do what you do best, which is to roll up your sleeves, make the world a better place, one child at a time. You will always be first.